Welcome back. Brighter Morning with Bhoe. My name is Bhoe Tiwari. This is Multicultural Television and U97.5 Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio. I had such an engaging discussion with the head of tutor just now that I went over my time. So I want to apologize to my crew. Good guys who are always helpful and try to make things go right. And I want to apologize to Chanel Al-Suran for running into her news time. Always so pleasant and bringing the news to you. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe, as I said, and we have on the line Mr. Rushton Paray, who is the Member of Parliament for Mayaro, and we want to say welcome to him and begin a discussion with him. Rushton, how are you?
Good morning to your viewers and listeners. Let me first
take the volume up for him. We are not hearing him. Yeah, go ahead. Good morning, Rushton.
Are you hearing me now, Bhoe? Morning. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, good now. Yes. Good now.
Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. And I want to first congratulate the management and staff of Multicultural Television to the telecommunication space. I've been enjoying your post for the last couple of weeks, and I wish your team all the best, Bhoe.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. We need all the luck we can get, of course, and we will proceed to do the best we can here. There are little hiccups here and there in the station as you start a new station, and there are technological problems as well, but I mean, eventually we're going to sort them out. And I have no doubt, given the kind of programming that we are committed to, which is local programming, regional programming, it is going to make a big difference on the landscape of viewership and with the radio as well, the reach of the radio. It's going to make a difference in terms of consciousness in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to thank you for coming on the program. Let me start. I know that you didn't bargain for this, but did you see the conversation with the head of tutor and myself?
I got the last part, the last 10-15 minutes, and I want to share. I mean, I'm glad you're asking that, because my concern, especially for school reopening in the constituency, and I think it's going to be an issue for a lot of rural communities. These schools, these buildings have been down for almost a year and a half. What is going to happen? And I'm asking the minister this directly. What provisions are being put in place between now and September to sanitize these schools? You have rat and snake and bat that has been, fighting up inside of these buildings. You have electrical components that have been dormant, rusted, erosion. What maintenance work is being done to have these buildings ready? Yeah. So I think the tutor person who was there was on spot with some of the issues. And what are we doing with these 2,000 students who have dropped out of school over the last year and a half? No mention is being made about those things. So I think we are in a real conundrum with regards to opening back school outside of the issues of vaccines.
Yes. So the issue is not really just reopening the school at the start of the academic year, but how do you manage the transition to a more amenable and constructive engagement in the education sector and increase the value of education to our students? And the tutor representative was making a very important point. There is a situation of learning loss. The fact that students didn't get their full education, they got it differently, there were lots of adjustments, etc. And there's a retrieval requirement. And we know that education, certainly in the primary and the secondary school system, is a step-by-step process. You build on the information and the knowledge that you acquire in 1 year on the other, and in 1 month on the other, and so on. It's an acquisition process there. So, I mean, there are real problems in the education sector. Hopefully the Minister of Education will join me, and we will have, I've had a conversation with her, and we will have a discussion as well. And the one place that we don't want to see a crisis is in education, where thousands of our students are, and thousands of our, and on which thousands of children and their parents depend, you know. But let me start with you. You are a parliamentary representative, Rushton, and that is a hard job, as I know from experience. And if you really care about your constituents and you are committed to them, it is a very, very demanding task. So let me start by asking about your COVID-19 task force initiative. What is it? How successful is it? Why are you doing it? What kind of support did you get for it? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. A few months ago, when the transmission rates for the Mayaro constituency, or what in medical terms, County River, it was very 80 points, which we said that you had 80 COVID positive patients out of every 10,000. That was an alarming rate, and I could not, as the Member of Parliament, sit by and do nothing. So I reached out to the political leader and advisor of this plan that I had. And with a bit of warning and concern, she approved me going forward with it. And I got in contact with the heads of all of our divisions here in Mayaro, the police, the CMOH office, the fire services, our nursing groups, the head of our business community. And we decided to form this virtual task force where we are going to see what can we do as private sector, as the political arm of governance, local government, because the chairman of the corporation, the CEO of the corporation, councillors were invited to join. How could we get a tripartite arrangement going that would bridge the gaps that we felt were not being dealt with by central government to aid in combating the COVID-19? Now, my personal view was that the COVID-19 battle can be won on the ground through local government. So we decided to take a number of initiatives in terms of communications.
Let me stop you there for just a minute. So you feel that the local government system and the resources of the local government system are not being enlisted enough in addressing the issue of the management of this COVID situation. Is that correct?
It is correct from my view, because I could not see the central government communication strategy and their tactics getting into rural communities in Mayaro. How do you get them in the back of Lejeune, Mahabal Singh? We decided through the task force to put miking systems, send a mic in every corner of the constituency, reminding our constituents of your responsibility in assisting in the battle against COVID-19, wearing your mask, social distancing. We got the messaging straight into homes in every corner of the constituency. Another area that we felt that local government had the power to assist with the communication and messaging was through your councillors. Now, the Mayaro Regional Corporation has 6 electoral districts, 5 which is controlled by the UNC, 1 which is controlled by the PNM. But in this battle, there is no politics. So I engaged all the councillors and I utilized their voices on these messages to go into their electoral districts and send the messages inside there. What they were also able to do, Bhoe, based on the fact that they have a more intimate relationship at the ground level as well. We were able to farm out our over 65s to get vaccines. We assisted people with registration for vaccines at the ERHA.
Yes.
We were able to work with the police to assist them in terms of reducing their rate of cyclic quarantine. We had an issue in the Eastern Division here where about 40% of the police officers were constantly going into quarantine, and it was reducing the police's ability to do the monitoring of families who are in quarantine. And we had issues with people walking about, going into supermarkets and so on, although they were mandated via order to some. So we reached out to the police, we got them sanitizers, we got them K95 masks, we improved the whole sanitization of the police system in terms of the police stations, the cars. But we worked with the seniors in the Eastern Division. And while their resources were coming in bit by bit, I'm not saying that the central government was not providing material for them, but we were able, through the task force, to reach out to the private sector to get them some assistance so that they can reduce their numbers. I think the numbers of officers in Eastern Division is under 5% now. Our transmission rate is considerably down in the constituency. And I think Mayaro in itself, because of this arrangement that we made in terms of dissemination of information and so on, it has worked well for us up here.
Okay. What is your assessment of how government has handled this COVID pandemic, and what would you do that, I mean, I know that you're doing in your constituency what you thought was necessary to make it better, and you are saying that you had good results with that. Could you make an assessment of government's performance on this and how you would improve it? And I take it you are very strongly behind the vaccination drive.
Absolutely. From my research, my reading, my understanding of the science, I am comfortable with the vaccination system. I urge and I encourage every single citizen who is take the vaccines to accept it. I want to say from the offset that in March 2020, I think the Prime Minister made some very good calls in terms of when he returned from his African trip. I think within a couple of days he had to be updated on the situation, and by Monday morning, schools were closed, public service was in some transformation and so on. And I think we started well, not all the information. All we would have had to go with was the WHO play, which to me at that time was the best way, the best method to move forward. But I think the government skidded off when the Oxford report came in. That Oxford report, which was nothing scientific, the people said, listen, this has no ranking. But the government took the Oxford report and put themselves in a place where comfort set in, that they're the best in the world in terms of the strategy. But you know what happened during that time in the ensuing months, Bhoe? The government failed to reach out for help. One would ask, why today? And I can tell you over the last month or so, I have seen more private sector participation with the TTMA and the Supermarkets Association and so on. But we had months from March last year. The government failed to reach out to private sector for support. Why it is, private medical institutions weren't being harnessed. Why private doctors weren't being harnessed. Why private sector in terms of funding on certain things. Now, we at the Mayaro COVID-19 Task Force, we reached out to private sector and tell you, Bhoe, private sector want to join the battle. They want to join the war against COVID-19. But we wasted a whole year because, the government felt, hey, we were doing so well. We don't need anybody help. They even refused to reach out to the opposition as well because Dr. Rowley has taken the position that he don't want no help from nobody. And the thing is, we are at a point where 1 year gone and there was no data tracking. Look, both today, I don't think the government can tell you exactly how many dispossessed, how many citizens who are unemployed, how many require constant support over the next couple of months. We as MPs and councillors are being every day with a demand that is meant for support.
Yes.
And this is a year to get this data, put strategies in place. So even the grant system, look how that has failed tremendously. You are telling citizens, well, by the end of the year, you'll go get the grant. Come
Yeah.
on, man, people need the money
Meanwhile, they
to
have
buy
to
food,
eat.
pay the installments,
Yeah.
and so on. So
Yes.
they failed, totally.
Okay, let's talk about some of the fallout from COVID. You are a person who focuses a lot on small and medium enterprises, and you yourself are a small business owner, and you are in the technology field, in the IT field. Can you talk a little bit about what has happened to small and medium enterprises and what should be done about that? Because, I mean, the government actions, I don't think have really impacted positively on the community. You have a lot of failed businesses. You have a lot of businesses for whom cash flow is important, liquidity is important. You have, I mean, I'll let you talk about it. Go ahead.
Sure. We had to be very careful of the livelihood versus lives issue. And if we were to look at what was happening around the world, I don't think that we in Trinidad and Tobago embarked on anything different that was being done in Europe and America. What was different, though, was you had these countries who have complex economies, but had a number of robust systems pre-COVID. And those things were able to guide those economies, and they fared well. So, for instance, a lot of economies in Europe and America, they did not have to force a digital transformation. A lot of workings were already in place via telecommunications. So the movement of people and productivity moved from in your building into your home with an ease. So if you look at some figures for some of those economies, they grew during the pandemic. But when you have economies, more so like Trinidad and Tobago, where 60% of the labor is what we touch labor, in that you have to in a building to serve people. And there was no way you could digitally transform that work. You had to shut this down. When you economies like ours, where there is a high reliance, the state for subventions and so on, puts a lot more pressure. So here we are with about 20,000 small businesses, a lot of them engaged in this touch industry. These people went home. What I found was very poor in of the government was their inability to give the central bank the authority to lay some strong guidelines for the banking and financial institutions. But if I would just draw to on the last correspondence that was made public between the governor of the central bank and the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, the governor of the central bank made 5 or 6 areas absolutely clear that he wanted to see in terms of a 5-month window to support small businesses in terms of deferring of loans with no penalty and interest. He wanted 5 months. Lo and behold, the Bankers Association, through some of the banks, while person bank respond, 3 months, there was no conversation around waiving of penalty and interest. When you see the total disregard for the governor of the central bank, it tells me something is wrong. And we have a minister of finance who loves to jump into the affairs of the central bank. And this was one opportunity. I would have welcomed his intervention in terms of dealing with the banking institutions. So you have all these small businesses, and I can tell you, Bhoe, in Mayaro, which is my main focus, we have several, hundreds of small restaurants and bars and so on that could not maintain their employees, so they had to shut their doors. I do not know, and I haven't heard from either the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Trade, who is responsible for the development of small and micro enterprises in Trinidad and Tobago. What is the long-term plan? What is the long-term plan to get these businesses? Bhoe, you would know that SMEs are family businesses. Family businesses employ the most amount of people in any economy. And the state did not give any type of consideration of how are we going to soften this one-year blow to small business. The minister would say, well, we give grants in NETCO and we apply for this. I mean, the funding grants that were Ministry of Finance, but when you look at the numbers of people who were able to access that, it was ridiculously low. And it exposed a serious problem that we have had in terms of businesses that are understood properly. They are not known to the government in terms of its registration, its vatability, and so on. So all these things have exposed serious issues. But what is to me is that from March 20 last year to today, nothing has changed. Nothing has been put in place to regularize these businesses. How do we get them into the system? What programs have been put in place to find all these little small shopkeepers and bar owners? Listen, let us get you into the system where the government can know who you are. You will be able to access all the grants, all the supports, and we may be able to give you a waiver or a forgiveness for all these years you were operating and you did not register. But Bhoe, nothing is coming from the state in terms of dealing with those matters. So as far as small and micro enterprises go, Bhoe, we are in a very, very bad place, and I do not know with this, the upcoming with this new Delta variant, bordering, aiming to heading into the country at some point in time, because the Prime Minister says, don't be naive, it's going to get here. We may see more constraint in business operations. So it's in a really bad place.
Yeah. Well, the good side of that is that we are proceeding apace with the vaccination. And hopefully we will get more vaccines in addition to the 400,000 that we are now, the 800,000 that we are now dispensing to 400,000 people. But I take your point about the small and medium enterprises and the impact on families and the impact on communities. And I take your point that what the government has done, even what they have said they would do, has not been implemented well. And secondly, there is more that needs to be done, which they are not talking about. It's almost as if they are not aware of what is happening to the small and medium business sector. And we'll have some small businessmen, medium businessmen come to talk with us over the course of the week, because we want to share their experience with the country. Because one of the problems in this country is that you hear government views, you hear official views, you hear opposition responses, you might hear a trade union response, but you do not really know what is happening in the society. The ordinary man doesn't get a chance to speak about his condition and his experience. The small business owner doesn't get an opportunity to speak. Big business might speak through the chambers and so on. So I think we're going to have to open up the conversation and let the country talk to itself so that it learns about what is really happening. And I'm grateful that you are giving a constituency view, because you are on the ground, you are with local government, you are with parliament as a parliamentary representative with your people and the businesses there, and you have a sense of what's happening in the ground. Tell me what it's like for people now in this COVID period as we begin the process of getting back the economy on track. We have construction open, we have manufacturing open, we have curbside, we have vendors, etc. What is happening in your constituency with the people and the communities, etc.?
But while all those things are opening, you need money to spend.
And you have to have income.
Money to spend,
you have to have income.
You have to have income. So, and the challenge is that many of those folks, many of my constituents, especially at that mid and lower level, have been out of work. And remember, the scenario here in Mayaro and by extension in Tobago, we were already a struggling economy. in January 2020. Failed government policies, failed strategies by a minister of finance who every year came with a story that was sold that he's a magician and you know the rains were gone. But we were already in a bad place. So COVID-19 exposed the government's failure, their failure to effectively manage this economy. Because remember, coming into January 2020, our public sector debt was already over $150 billion.
Billion, yes.
Right now, Bhoe, our debt to GDP is about 85%. And the Minister of Finance will come and tell you, well, look, there are other economies. The World Bank says borrow to make sure that your people are comfortable and so on. But these economies that he's looking at 105 and 120% debt to GDP ratios, those countries have solid, working, diversified economies. Those economies are strong and robust. And what is most important, those economies use legislation to plan a payment strategy over the long term. And I'm saying this is what we're missing here in Trinidad as well. We are increasing our debt. We are increasing our debt, but we have no plan. How are we going to pay it back in 5, 10, 15 years?
We have no fiscal governance in this country, none whatsoever. Ironically, you mentioned this issue of debt to GDP and the other countries and so on, and the Minister of Finance's response. I had to smile the other day when I saw Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of England, talking to his parliament and indicating to them that he was going to dramatically cut foreign aid and justifying it by saying that he had to be concerned that the debt to GDP ratio of Britain was close to 100%. So he was very, very conscious of this debt to GDP ratio. He was very conscious of the debt issue, and he may have been, I would say, perhaps not entirely aligned in his argument when he was arguing that that was a justification for cutting the foreign aid. But I think it is important to note that a big country like the United Kingdom, in terms of GDP and in terms of production, in terms of competitiveness in the world, was speaking to the issue of debt to GDP ratio and being concerned about it. Yeah?
But look what's happening with our two biggest energy players, BPTT and Shell.
Shell, yes.
They are going to be constrained in a few years' time. The British government has ruled that, countries that are in violation of certain environmental rules and laws and so on, the British government is to impose sanctions and probably taxes and so on any companies operating in countries outside that are in violation of certain rules. Now, when you combine that with the fact that the European market is going full electric engines and there's going to be a reduction in the manufacture of gasoline engines and so on, Trinidad and Tobago in 10 years by 2030, because we've signed on to that Paris Accord, what are we going to do when the industries are going to be strangled? Where are we going to move all these 10,000 workers who work in the energy sector? It comes back down to no planning. I am not hearing, even in the transformation plan that was done sometime last year, this roadmap, nothing spoke to 2030. What is a post-COVID Trinidad and Tobago going to look like in terms of the industry? We have about 100,000 people out of jobs today. And as a fact, I think the Minister of Finance said so through the NIB records when he came to Parliament a couple of weeks ago. It's a mixed batch of people, low income, low skill, middle income, middle skill, high income with the layoffs that we have. What is the plan for new industries? How are we going to engage the green economy to move some of these employees? What are we going to do with the 2,000 or 3,000 WASA employees that may be shelved in this transformation? We need to find ways to put people to work. But my problem, Bhoe, is that I am not hearing any plan. I am not seeing anything in writing from the government. There is no discussion. And what is even more worrying to me is where is all the business leaders in the country? I am not hearing anything from them, you know, our heads of churches and so on. It's like we just sit back and we are accepting the way things go and we will pray and all will be well. That is not going to happen, Bhoe. We need to have an aggressive, we need to have a multi-stakeholder team outside of the politics and get a plan in track to put Trinidad and Tobago back on track. That is not happening, Bhoe, and it's very worrying from where
No,
I
I
sit,
agree.
not only as an MP, but as a businessman, as a father.
No,
I am concerned.
I agree. We need a national strategy and we need a collaborative strategy. And we need a strategy that addresses the issue of inclusion in this society. Because one of the things that COVID has done is that it has shown not just the wide gaps between countries and what that means, it has shown the wide gaps within countries and how vulnerable and how poor people are really and how difficult it is for them to be resilient. But that gets me into something else, which is that the government has established a ministry responsible for digitalization. And you are a person knowledgeable in this field. You have an IT company. You understand the technology of communications. And you understand the importance of this both to government and to business. What is your take on this? I mean, first of all, do you support the ministry? And what are some of the things that we need to see happen?
Well, first of all, I thought that the ministry got off on the wrong foot. So, for instance, if I were to ask some simple questions, what is the address for the Ministry of Digital Transformation? What is the phone number? Who is the permanent secretary for that ministry? Nobody can answer that question. Is this still in public administration, physically?
No, it's not.
Who is the staff in this?
Physically, you mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? You have a gentleman who I have the greatest of respect for. I know the minister has been involved in ICT for many, many years. He's held several positions in the ICT industry. And if we have a chance of success, I think he is well suited to take us there. But he can't do it alone. He needs certain things around him. And may I start that you can't tell the address, the phone number, and who is the PS in that ministry. That to me is a challenge. The other thing is, where does digital transformation start? Digital transformation is not converting a paper document and making an online form. Digital transformation is a mindset. It's a thinking, it's a philosophy. What are the plans to take that mindset and that thinking? How do we grow it over the next 5 years or 10 years? So I saw in the newspaper a couple of days ago that a meeting was held between the Minister of Digital Transformation and the Minister of Local Government and all the heads of regional corporations. And somewhere in the Facebook posting that I read was that they were discussing the digital transformation of local government. Now, Bhoe, in 1986, I was 16 years old, and I recall listening the budget statement by Minister Robinson. And in 1986, he budgeted $5 million TT dollars for a digital transformation of licensing offices. It has taken us from 1986 to 2020 for the U-turn system to be implemented that has brought some sort of digital transformation in the licensing division, in the motor vehicle industry. I am concerned that because of a lack of planning, I mean, how can you possibly look at local government as a body that to start this conversation for transformation? I would have, as minister, the first thing I needed to do as a Ministry of Digital Transformation is looking at the fact that we have lost 2,000 students in the education system due to COVID-19. We have to, what is the role of the ministry in converting and transiting every school as a digital hub for student teachers? That to me is a priority. But we have enough fiber optic cables in this country to run around it about 3 times, right? We need to put it in form, create what you call, intelligent municipalities. If I want a passport, I should not have to go to Port of Spain or San Fernando to apply for a passport. I should be able to go to my municipal office in Rio Claro here, and all arms of government service should be able to be electronically in Rio Claro, because we can bring these things. But first of all, we need the local government reform. That transformation has to be done. That has been on the government's drawing board since 2016.
2016.
Senator Khan, God bless his soul, he came here with a whole road show to talk about this local government. How can you have digital transformation when the physical system, the mindset, the resources required to do it is nowhere on the horizon? So I think we're going to have a lot of more talk shops, and I wait to see and hear of a plan for this digital transformation. I know the gentleman, the minister, is well tooled and skilled to do it, but I think if he doesn't have a good plan to work with, what is the role and function of IGovTT? What is their role in this new ministry? Nothing has been said about it, and I think the minister has a very difficult time in getting these things going. 6 years have gone, and I mean, the meal approach has not worked, and I am saying if in Mayaro here, my constituents still have to run to San Fernando for a driver's permit, a renewal, a passport, well then we can't transfer. We need to be able to try coming back to local government. I fix for every single problem in government lies in local government. Local government must be resourced appropriately. They must have money to do things, and I solve a lot of these issues. Decentralize Port of Spain, back the municipal corporations, keep Port of for entertainment and tourism and all the other nice things when the cruise ships come in. Bring services, and but when we bring services to the municipalities, people don't have to leave home 4 o'clock in the morning to reach Port of Spain, and you leave your children with nannies, and they have to drop them off for school, and then you're not seeing them when you come home 8 o'clock in the night, they're sleeping. We have a family issue in this country, a breakdown of family. We decentralize via ICT into municipalities. Couples, young couples can drop their kids to school, go to work, come back in time to catch them at 4 o'clock, have dinner with them, help them with their homework. And the couples themselves will increase their own relationships because I could see you in daylight. So but digital transformation is not only about changing paper into a computer monitor, but it's about a holistic way of how are we going to decentralize back into our municipalities, use ICT to connect all offices of government and bear the benefit of increased family time, increased family relationship, stronger bonding of children with their parents. And that is the holistic approach which digital transformation has to take place in this country.
Yeah, well, you're raising important issues here of restructuring the governance system, of decentralization and its implications. But I was just thinking that, I mean, digitalization should really mean that people don't really even have to walk into a local government office unless they want to. Once they had the means in their home, they could do most of the work by computer. And they could do it online, and they could go for the results, so that if they had to pick up a passport or had to pick up a piece of paper or something like that, I mean, all of those things could be, the passport can't be sent online, you would have to go and pick it up. But if it's a form of communication or a form of documentation, it could be sent online. And the second thing is that for people who don't have computers, in each community, you could have a system that would allow for people to be facilitated in that process, even if they are illiterate, so that you can help them to do that. And you can deal with all your central government issues, your local government issues in a way that is easy and online. And you can do this for everybody, whether they are computer literate or not, because you'd create the systems. Systems. You see, I believe in structures and systems as a solution to things. And I know that you do too. And I feel we have to get to some of those things. Now, we will have the minister responsible for digitalization on Monday, and we will talk to him. And I'm sure he has good plans, and as you said, he's a person of some competence. The question, of course, is in the implementation. What do you need to do to make implementation possible? So I wish him all the good luck in the world. But I'm going to ask you a hard question now. I hope it doesn't disturb you too much. But I must ask the question because of where you are. You are in Mayaro. You just talked about local government and all of these things. And we've had no end of problems with the local government in your area where you are parliamentary representative. So we have the situation now of Mr. Anil Maraj, who basically has been charged. And we have the to-ing and fro-ing of whether he should step down, whether he should remain a councillor, and so on. Do you have a response on that issue? Hello? Did you hear? Rushton, did you hear?
Well, at the end of the day, every man is innocent until guilty in a court of law.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in the court of public opinion, you are always guilty as charged. Yes? Hello?
Yes, I'm hearing. I'm
Hello?
hearing you.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Would you keep the connection?
Yeah.
This is important. I don't want him off now.
Hello?
We're hearing you.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm saying is that, in the court of public, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was saying, every man is innocent until proven guilty in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion, you are guilty as charged. And, as public officers, we all have a duty to operate or to expose a behavior that is unquestionable all the time. Space where the accusations have been. He's a councillor, has no obligation to resign the position because, he has to prove they have to prove his guilt at the end of the day. I know the PNM would want a resignation because it means that, you have to go back to the polls and nobody wants to go back to the polls at this time. But, we always have to be so careful on what we say, and the poll does at a higher standard. And I mean, I wish Councillor Maraj all the best, and he will have his day in court to prove his innocence at the end of the day.
Okay, and but we've had precedents there as well, for instance, where the chairman has been under scrutiny for the same kind of thing, Mr. Glenram, I remember, even in my time. Is there something amiss in the corporation there generally? Is there something wrong with the culture, or is it a problem of the culture of local government, or what?
I think it's a culture issue throughout Trinidad and Tobago for the last 50 years. I do believe that, there are issues in terms of, we're operating with laws and regulations that were designed during the COVID era. We are in 21 and we still have the public officers' inability to act because of regulations. So I believe that, we do have cultural issues. We do have issues within the governance system. I do believe we have too much of open windows that need to be closed. And at the end of the day, not a policeman, not a judge, not an MP, not a prime minister. We don't import anybody for these roles. we are all products of the society that we grew up in and we live in. So if you as an individual is on the side of the road and you are watching governance in this country, whatever you see is a product of our culture. It comes out of our homes. It comes out of our communities. So, Bhoe, if what you are seeing is bad, then it is something that we are breeding within our communities. If it is something that is good, it means that we are nurturing that in our communities. So we cannot take ourselves out of how the world sees us, unfortunately. So it means we have to, step back and look at change. Do we change our behavior from kindergarten, from the day we go to kindergarten, early childhood? How do we interact in our homes? How do we interact with our neighbors? Because these are the individuals who will be councillors and MPs and policemen and teachers and so on at the end of the day.
Leaders are products of their society, but societies also take cue from their leaders. Do you think that if leaders had a higher standard and were committed to high standards of ethical conduct, and do you think that that would have an influence on the culture of this society?
I don't think that should be limited to leaders, Bhoe. I think that should be the behavior that every citizen.
No, but leaders have to lead. Leaders have to lead. Right? You see, if you are prime minister, for instance, you have to have the highest requirements for conduct, if you are a minister, etc. And that has an impact on this society, and it possibly can change culture. I won't hold you to the fire on these issues. I know that they can be challenging, but I think we have to get to the point in Trinidad and Tobago where we really discuss the business of what kind of ethical environment and what kind of moral environment we create in the society and what we can expect out of the society. But Rushton, it has been a pleasure talking to you. We got a chance to talk about very important issues in your constituency and nationally, and I hope you will come on the program on another occasion. We'll have other things to discuss, and I want to thank you for coming on the program. We've now come to the end of Brighter Morning with Bhoe. We have been talking to Rushton Paray, the Member of Parliament for the UNC in Mayaro. And we now move on to the news with Chanel Alsuran.